Good afternoon. I'm Amy Nitschke with the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. I want to welcome you all to our session in the fourth Path to Superior Service led by EWH University. EWH Small Business Accounting is a strong partner of WRAs who offer bookkeeping, payroll, business consulting, and tax planning services. These webinars are hosted by the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, dedicated to the success of the food service and hospitality industry. WRA serves as your primary resource for regulatory guidance, training opportunities, and solutions to relevant challenges. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our speaker today. Feel free to submit questions using the chat box or the Q&A. There will be some time to where Joseph will have some questions towards the end that you can participate in. If you have not turned your video on and you do have that capability, please go ahead and do that now. And just a reminder to have your video and audio, your video on, but your audio off unless you're participating in the conversation. I will now introduce our presenter. I'm excited to have with us today Joseph Hastreiter, partner at EWH Small Business Accounting. I'm going to pause here.
And I just wanted to circle back part of the services that
I think we got it there. I'm sorry, I just muted everybody because there was somebody that I could hear. So I'm going to try that introduction again. I will introduce today our presenter, Joseph Hastreiter, partner at EWH Small Business Accounting. As the son of a small business owner, Joseph would sit around the dinner table as a child and hear how much his father, Ed, helped organizations grow their businesses. Fast forward to today, as a partner of the family business, Joseph has led the marketing and sales departments while helping over 1,000 business owners achieve knowledge and tools to run their business through the EWH University. With certifications in coaching and 5 different talent assessments, Joseph does whatever it takes to find new ways to help businesses reach their best potential and get results. Joseph's passion and experience is what has helped him build EWH University, a single source for critical information, tools, skills, and support that business owners need to achieve success. Joseph, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
There. Thank you very much, Amy. And you could also just keep an eye on the mute just in case somebody does get unmuted as we go through. That way we'll just know that's covered as we go through. And a big thank you to the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. This is our third of our third-part series. We had our first 2 on understanding cash flow 1, 2, 3 and setting, and also on setting. The second was on setting and resetting sales goals and profitability. So I strongly encourage you, if you're interested in one of those 2 topics, those are still available out there. You can go check those out to help you understand your numbers and set some goals for your numbers, because especially during the pandemic, with things changing so quickly in sales and expenses, being able to set and reset some of those sales targets can be really important, and understanding your numbers more important now than ever, because either your numbers control you or you control the numbers, and understanding them is one of those key elements to help give you as much influence over your numbers as possible, even when there's so many things in the environment that are outside of our control. So it's one of the couple topics that we touched on first, to be able to help support you and your business. And now today we're really going to turn to, because once somebody has some goals and a plan, the question is, how do we make that happen? And really the first thing we have to look at that is our people. Ourselves and our people are the first thing that put those numbers on the scoreboard, whether it's influencing our internal staff or giving a great experience to the people that are going to come into our restaurant or come into our business. So being able to really understand people is key, which is where today's topic comes in, of these 4 paths to superior service. So what we're going to do to kind of just give you a roadmap for today, and then we'll briefly dive into the first bullet point that you see there, is we're going to talk about the golden rule versus the platinum rule, which is our way of really looking at how do we deliver superior service in a way that really meets people where they're at, because some of us are very similar in nature and others of us are very different. And then we'll also kind of start with a simple example to get us thinking about things. If someone was to come sit down in your restaurant, or maybe you had somebody that was coming in for an interview at your restaurant or your business, And then how do we align with some of these insights to be able to look at, what might be needed in the front of the house or the back of the house, and or how might we interact with this customer to deliver the type of service that they're looking for. And this is really going to touch on then communication, working, and collaboration styles, and learning about these 4 different types. And then the real power of this will be on retention and service, because especially in today's world where things are so short-staffed, our ability to understand our team more can really, it helps give us at least a little bit of an edge, or help influence our ability to be able to retain the staff that we have. And also, especially since we're short-staffed, allow it to give us a little more insight into how we can really provide a great experience for them, even when sometimes we're short-staffed. So it's really about meeting people where they're at, because what we all really need to remember is that we are all in leadership. Whether you're the person in the restaurant that's greeting people when they're coming in and make sure they get seated well and have a good experience from there to their table, or you're the waiter or waitress that's going to come over and give them a great experience while they're in the restaurant, or whether you're one of the cooks in the back that's making sure that the meals get out on time and the quality is in place, or whether you're the manager trying to make sure and lead the whole restaurant to delivering a great experience for everybody that comes in. So it's important to remember is no matter who we are, in what part of the organization, we're all in leadership. And each one of these communication styles and collaboration and working styles that we're going to learn about today is going to really help us understand the value that each one of them brings to the table in terms of their leadership. And the other thing is too, that these styles can be very different. So sometimes also they can conflict because they do things so differently. So we'll also share some insights at the end of the day, at the end of the session as well, about just some communication tips, which was the handout that you received in advance, which gave you some communication tips and a few other insights that we'll talk about when we get there. And then when we come to the end, we'll also talk about next steps and how you can put this into practice and where to go from here. So to start, let's talk briefly about the golden rule and the platinum rule and how it relates to this topic today. We were all taught the golden rule as we grew up. Treat others as you want to be treated. Well, that works really well if you are like me. And it's really about the platinum rule. Treat others as they want to be treated. But the question is, how do we know how other people want to be treated? How do we know how to treat people, or how do we know how people want to be treated? Because, for instance, each one of these behavioral styles will give us different insights into understanding how some people can be so different and how they would want to be treated or interacted with differently, or put slightly differently, how they would want to have a different experience coming into their business or in the process of sitting down in your restaurant or with working with them. And the other thing is, how do we show people that we care? Because to meet people where they're at, we can have our idea of how we're going to show our caring, but if they're very different from us, they might have a different idea of what it looks like or sounds like or feels like to be cared for. And to really be able to meet people where they're at, it's also going to help us understand, as someone that's very near and dear to my heart once said, how do we help other people shine? So with that, let's look at some of these different styles and approaches in a little bit of a more generic way without talking about directly what they are. And as we're going through these, if you think about your restaurant or your business, think about where some of these people might fit well and excel. So for instance, you'll see on the very far left, and again, whether this is somebody you're interviewing with or a customer that would sit down in your restaurant, it'll give you some context. But what you can see on the very far left is you have this first type that's direct. It can be very blunt. It can be loud, fast. They're also a decider. They might come, sit down, know exactly what they want right away. They eat super quick and they're in and out. They give about one-word responses sometimes. They can be talkative. Sometimes they can have a very sarcastic wit and make funny jokes really quickly to help build rapport. These are also the type of people that like to be the center of the action or the center of the task, because they like to be in charge. And sometimes that even can come across a little bit demanding at times. In fact, that was actually one of the reasons we came up with this workshop, because it was about a year ago. I was on the phone with someone that was in the hospitality business in the Wisconsin Dells, And I remember he said he's been in the, the hospitality business for like 20 years. And he always wondered why some customers could be so demanding, why others could be so accommodating. And that's really also today is kind of the purpose of our session, to give some of our insights, because sometimes when people are so different than us, it's like, what can we do to make people happy? And just getting some of these insights that we're all different, and these are some of the natural ways that they respond, can help us realize that it's not us, just realize that's what's going on for them, meet them where they're at, and then we can kind of proceed forward accordingly. So that's the first style and approach. The next one, though, is not direct. It's more indirect. And to kind of give a little context to those terms, direct is like telling, like, hey, go look in the kitchen. Do we still have some of that meat left? Or indirect would be like, hey, could you go look back in the fridge and do you remember if we haven't? Sorry, let me back up. The indirect is more the asking style, which is, for instance, do you remember if we have some of that meat left in the fridge? Right, which is very different than the direct telling style, which is like, go look in the fridge and see if we have some meat left. Very different approaches to communication. This style is also very welcoming. It can also be loud and fast as well, but it's also very accommodating because it wants to create a great environment for everyone. And they also can say things like, well, what do you think I should get? Surprise me, right? Because they love surprises. They love to hang out. They're going to love to socialize. They're going to be very funny. They're going to laugh, and they're going to be the life of the party. And metaphorically, in some organizations, they want to be the voice, right? They want to speak on the organization's behalf, promote it, and so forth. So that's one style. The next and the third style is the one that's more indirect. It's still got that asking communication style, and it's welcoming, but it's also warm, and it creates a family atmosphere. It's a little bit slower paced. It's got a quieter tone of voice. And they also want to accommodate people and make them feel welcome too. And they are great because you can count on me, and they love to count because they want to make sure they have things together and get it together in terms of the organization. So when people come things are orderly and can run smoothly. Because for them, it's really about quality time and attention. And they want to be at the center of those relationships. And they also like to be the glue, because without these people, it's sometimes hard to hold it all together because they bring a lot of order and that people caring to the table. The last column then is those that are more direct. And instead of being blunt, this is more black and white. And there again, they talk slower or quieter because they like to think things through. They have all the ingredients or the details that they know all the details to make it work. And sometimes these customers that come in will want alone time and sit alone and away from others. They need that solitude time to recharge. And they're also very task focused, and they like to lead from behind the scenes. So as we went through some of these, from the ones on the very left over to the right, you might want to kind of start processing just based on some of these descriptions. Would this work more better for the front of the house or the back of the house? Or even from the front of your business, meaning the people that are going to be more the face of the company, or those that are going to work more from behind the scenes. Some of these also, maybe they want to be in the middle of all the action as well. This was kind of just a warm up to get you thinking about some of these qualities that could be important in different areas of your business to help really capitalize on people's strengths and where they're going to fit in best. Because each one of these styles brings a unique value and approach to the table. And our abilities as leaders to be able to place people in the right positions, maximize their strengths, and understand them, and better communicate with them can really accelerate the culture we have. And as organizational leaders, if we make our team, our internal team first, and we give them a great experience, they then translate that experience to those that come in the door. So that's a little bit on each one of those four. And also to, actually, let's come back to this one in a little bit later. But part of what this is about is we're going to learn about these four styles more specifically, because we did it there generally just to kind of open the table. But we need to remember we all have a style. It's just a matter of how do we utilize that style? And most importantly, it's about giving us all behavioral flexibility. So in the moment when we're having a quick interaction with someone, we can have the flexibility to communicate in that platinum rule in a way that they'll appreciate being communicated with. And the other thing that you're going to see in front of you is kind of just a nice little chart, and you're going to see 4 quadrants. On the bottom right, you see results, you see beliefs and emotions, you see the potential in the upper left-hand corner, and you see actions in the upper right-hand corner. So if you think about the result of delivering people a great experience, because remember, people will not remember what you told them. They will remember how you made them feel. And when people have these different styles and approaches in the next quadrant over, those beliefs and those emotions, they will have a different filter and experience of the world. And what they might believe is great service could be very different than somebody else. Somebody else might just be like, look, I want to get in and out. I want my order. I want to eat and I want to move. Where someone else wants to come in, sit down, be greeted with a smile, be able to chat it up and connect with somebody that's there and be able to enjoy their meal that way. Or someone that's going to want to sit, alone in the back corner and have some of that solitude time. So they all can have different beliefs about what quality service in caring is, because people also usually give what they want. So it's also important to know some of these differences so we can understand how to meet other people's needs as well. The other thing is, if you look in the top or left-hand corner, is how each likes to be treated, right? Because this will give us more insight into how other people will want to be interacted with among these 4 different styles. And this is the first time you can see in that upper left-hand corner, it's about potential. Because for instance, if you have somebody in a role that's difficult for them, like for instance, they prefer things more behind the scenes, but they're in a role that's constantly facing the customers or constantly interacting with other people, if that can be a little bit exhausting. So maybe having them in a role where they're a little bit more behind the scenes, there's not quite as much interaction with others, could really set them up to the potential to really be in a spot that they're going to be much more comfortable with and allow operations to work a lot more smoothly, because that's really kind of a role that's much more designed for them. Just like on the flip side, if you have somebody that loves facing the customers, loves being with people, and they're constantly in the back office going through deposits and checks that were being written, they might very quickly cease to shine, because the very thing that they do the best is giving people a great experience, but they're in a role that doesn't really allow them to share that value with the people in the organization. That potential and being aligned with it allows people to take the actions they need to then produce the result or the experience that we're looking for. So that gives us a little bit of context. And now to briefly talk about the specific tool that we're referring to, this tool is called DISC. And what you're going to notice is we pop these things up here to touch on this briefly, is you see the D, I, S, and C. And very briefly, without getting into a lot of detail, and if you go onto our website, we'll share this link with you afterwards. We have an article on there that goes a little bit deeper into some of these things, because the focus of our session today is understand the value each one of these brings to the table and understand a little bit of how to communicate with each one of them as well to give us a good foundation to start our learning from. So the D can stand for dominance, because it's how do we respond to problems and challenges. Some are very assertive, some are much more cautious. I stands for influence. How do we influence someone to our point of view or interact with others? Some people love interacting with other people and are super optimistic, where other people prefer much more solitude and alone time and might influence through skepticism. Very different spectrums of that. Also, we have the S for steadiness, which is how do we respond to pace, change, and consistency in the environment? Some people like a lot of consistency in pace, like 30 miles an hour, and actively avoid change or need a lot of preempting towards it, where there's others that can go at a super fast pace all the time, don't need a lot of consistency day to day, and they're totally fine with 120 miles an hour. Very different approaches. The other one then is the C for compliance, which is how do we respond to rules and procedures set by others? Some people have no problem following rules and procedures set by others. They ask for permission, where other people ask for forgiveness, if you know what I mean. right? Very different approaches to that as well. But what we'll also highlight here is you notice what's in red on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And these are really the qualities that make up these different communication styles. So you can see on the top right, the D's and the C's. They are much more task focused. They are direct communicators that telling, like, hey, go check the refrigerator. Do we have some of that meat left? Right? Because they're also very task focused, because sometimes in the process of things moving very quickly, there needs to be a more direct communication style to make sure there's clarity on what needs to be done. Also, for the D's, it's about getting the task done now. And for the C, it's about getting the task done the right way. And sometimes in that, it requires a more direct communication style. These styles also can operate just fine in an environment that's more antagonistic, or simply put with some challenge or conflict, or put a little bit differently. Sometimes they like to spice things up a little bit or be a little bit spicy, for instance. But also that can be a little bit more of the D that's kind of got our sarcastic wit, so to speak. The C's, though, also can work okay in that environment because they know in the process of quality control that they might have to give some people feedback to make sure things are being done the right way, right? And whenever that's happening, sometimes, that can cause some challenges depending on how people give and receive feedback. On the bottom, then, we have with the I and the S energy, they prefer a favorable environment and creating a great experience and being mindful of people's feelings. They're very people focused, which is also one reason that they have an indirect communication style, which is more of that asking style. Instead of just telling people what to do, it's kind of like, hey, do you remember if we have meat left in the kitchen there? But what they're also really asking is, can you go look in the refrigerator to see if there's meat left? Kind of a funny story. My mother's an indirect communicator and my father's a direct communicator. And my father's learned very well over the years. And this was about a year ago. I'm sitting on the couch eating an ice cream cone. And my mother turns to me and says, hey, do you know if we have any of those ice cream cones left in the kitchen? And my father looks at me and says, that means in about 10 minutes, she's going to ask you for an ice cream cone. So we all have different ways in which we can communicate with each other. And the challenge is if one's got a direct and an indirect, we could be making a request for someone it's just right over their head. Also then on the left and the right, what you're also going to see is the D and the I energy can be much more faster paced. It's much more extroverted and expressive. You need to talk things out loud. They're going to come in and be very talkative and very social in a lot of ways. And they're also going to want to produce activity, more of it, faster, sometimes louder, even, for instance. And they'll want to get the party started, so to speak. Where the S's and the C's, they're going to want to control, they're going to want to slow things down. They're more introverted. They think things through. They produce more passivity because they want to produce less reaction, slow it down, quieter. And kind of just metaphorically for a moment, the D's sometimes are the ones that are leading and managing and helping direct people to know what to do, where the I's then are bringing people in and welcoming them and greeting them and socializing, connecting with them while they're there, while the S's are also doing some of that as well, along with servicing them, making sure that they're cared for and that their needs are met. We'll talk about more when we get to that in a little bit more detail. And then where the C's come in is through quality control. I don't know if any of you remember Monica Geller on Friends, but she was always very particular about making sure things were up to her specific standards and specifications for the quality that she wanted to deliver. So that's a little bit about those characteristics. So again, we're talking about DISC here, which is about behavioral styles, because we can all have a different style and approach to our leadership, communication, working style, and collaboration. And understanding some of these characteristics in red, once we understand where we're at, can help us understand how to easily adjust. Like if you have a lot of D and I energy and you're fast-paced, extroverted, and you like to produce a lot of activity, if you're going to be interacting with someone that has more SC energy, that you need a little bit slower paced. Also to know that you need to give them some time to think it through. They're going to not necessarily think through talking out loud, and they're going to want to have, produce less reaction. And also on the other side for the CNS energy to understand, sometimes we need to pick up the pace a little bit. Sometimes we need to learn how to share ideas and express some of that and think a little bit more on our feet. So it allows us to kind of extend grace to each other, to know where our center of gravity is, what our nature is, because it's not always natural for us to hop in and out of some of these styles. So it can give us a better understanding and appreciation of each other, so that when we come to the table, we can have better insights into how to collaborate and then meet each other's needs for where some of these important pivot points are. So also another thing that is just important to note, on the first slide, we talked about how the D stands for dominance, the I stands for influence, the S stands for steadiness, and the C stands for compliance. Is also, those are just descriptor words. Don't get too attached to those words, because also the emotion that's driving any one of these styles very much impacts what shows up in the style. If we're in a state of excitement and gratitude and happiness, there's a totally different aspect of each one of these styles that can show up than if our expectations aren't met, or if we're angry or frustrated or upset or sad. So the descriptor words, there can be a lot of different descriptor words for these. Like for instance, you can see the D they can have that dominance word of determined. The I could stand for influence or irrational, because sometimes emotion drives it so much. Or the S can stand for steadiness, or sometimes being stubborn. And the C can also stand for that compliance, or also can sometimes come across critical. Or also on the other end, the D's are the drivers, while the I's make things interesting and the S's bring stability, and the C provides that clarity or that quality control. So you can kind of just see from these different descriptor words how it gives us a greater understanding, and especially with this last one, how it can really bring a well-rounded experience from everyone that's there. Now I'll just kind of give you a quick example. There's a couple of restaurants that I like to visit pretty frequently. And there's one of them that I find very interesting. I love their food. They do a good job when they go in there, but they have a very different style than I do. And one of the things that I've noticed is almost everyone behind the bar is of the same behavioral style. And what's also interesting is that sometimes I can be there for 10 or 15 minutes. They don't necessarily even always look up or acknowledge that you're there. And it's a great restaurant. I always get along with them well. There's another restaurant nearby, though, that behind the bar, they have a diversity of all of these styles, which provides a kind of a much more well-rounded experience for the people that are going to come into the restaurant. And it's just an interesting observation, because sometimes people hire people like them. So that's what's kind of interesting about that one restaurant, is it's literally like everyone that they hire behind that bar is very identical. So sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for them to connect with some of the different type of people that come in. Also, another interesting note, just to kind of help you understand the application of this, is if we go back to this slide and you look on the bottom, you see the people focus. Some of you may remember well over a year ago now, Quick Trip ran a campaign ad that said hiring people. Now that you've had a little bit of training on this, you can see the I and S is the people focus. Now, I'm not sure Quick Trip would tell you that this is what they were fully aware that they were doing, but when they said hiring people, they were really looking for people that were super people orientated in the store, providing great customer service experience, because they're naturally inclined to provide great and friendly service. And then with a little bit of training, it helps it even more. So that was really for them looking at hiring that I and S energy. And I also know from a couple of years ago, seeing their head of training speak at an event that I was at, they also use behavioral interviewing questions to get at some of these traits, to understand, is somebody going to be best for them back in the kitchen preparing the food, or is somebody going to be best at the register kind of facing and interacting with all the customers? So that kind of also gives you some additional insight there as well. Okay. Again, you can go look on our website for more distinctions, but let's go through each one of these characteristics a little bit more to know the value that they bring to the table. So the D's can also be the drivers and deciders. They are great in those management and leadership roles. They want those roles. In fact, they love autonomy. They will despise being micromanaged because they like to be the deciders. It's also the most controlling out of all the styles. And that's partly because they want to be in control of what's going on. It's not necessarily about things being in compliance, which we'll come back to with that C energy. And they want it my way, and they want to own it. These are also some, like my dad, for instance, as a high D behavioral style. And during Thanksgiving, he'll roam around the house to make sure everything's taken care of, and that everything's under control, and everyone that's having a great experience, and kind of just keeping an eye on things. You'll also sometimes see these people being in security, like at certain late night establishments, for instance, to make sure that everything's under control. They are also amazing at setting the vision, the standards. They're also extremely creative. And these people have a sense of urgency. They want to get it done. I remember when I used to work at McDonald's when I was 16, because at McDonald's, they always have the goal of getting people through drive-through in 2 minutes. And one of the managers always had that high sense of urgency of watching that time up on the clock there to make sure that when people went through the drive-through, they got that done quickly. I don't know, for instance, the person that founded Jimmy John's, but Sub So Fast You'll Freak was likely somewhat influenced by a high D behavioral style, because the right time for this style to get it done is now, not later, right? So that can be important to know with this particular style. If they ask you to do something, they're not asking you to do it later. They want it to get it done now. So to kind of go into a few more details about a couple other points related to this style is they have a determination to solve problems. In fact, if they don't have a problem to solve, they will find one. And hopefully that is not with people. And again, they have the need for control. And they have a lot of confidence that they can be responsible for things and get things done. There's a high ego strength there, which is also why they like that autonomy. They want to get it done, wrap it up, get it out the door, kind of with that example from McDonald's. There's always an ability to look forward about where we're going. What does the future look like? And they don't necessarily need all the details for that. They can sometimes have a general idea, because they can be very comfortable with taking on risk. And then they just kind of dive into it head first and go for it. They can be very creative. Also in getting people moving. They can be direct. And they will also state unpopular positions. They're not afraid of a little conflict, and they know sometimes in the workplace, people are going to need to work things through, and that might be interesting at times, right? So they'll state some of those unpopular positions or speak up on someone's behalf. And they will sometimes, even when they're doubted, that will make them more motivated to want to excel and succeed. Michael Jordan is a good example of that. Tom Brady is a good example of that. And they see the big picture. They like to set those lofty goals and inspire the team to that. And again, they can be to the point or a little bit blunt or raw. And it can also be intense, but what it really is sometimes frustration to want to break through and solve the problem. If any of you ever remember the movie Apollo 13, when they were trying to bring the spacecraft back, you may remember the guy that was leading that said, failure is not an option, right? So they are very determined to succeed and to make it happen. So that's a little bit about the D energy there. And then if we go to the I energy, this is about influence and inviting people in. They like to lead from the front as well, but not with the task like the D, because the D energy does like to lead from the front, but it likes to lead with the task and directing people and what should be done and so forth. The I's like to lead from the front because, again, it's kind of like they like to be that voice of the team, and they want to be able to be that life of the party. Because for them, there's no such things as strangers. They're just friends they haven't met yet. These people will, for instance, come to a bar, for instance, sit next to a stranger, and it'll be an hour and a half later, and they're still having a conversation, learning everything about each other. That I energy also brings the fun. They like to connect and socialize with their customers. So they're great at connecting, and they're very creative in an influential way and be able to persuade people as well. They can sometimes be great at also negotiating conflict. That's why they can build trust and openness. They have very optimistic, and that's why they can always think they can sometimes get things done, and sometimes they think they can, and they don't quite have it yet. For any of you that remember when Brett Favre played, he always thought he could get the ball in somewhere, which sometimes made for very exciting times, and other times sometimes allowed him to drop the ball. So these people have a need to interact, to find people to interact with. They can be very expressive of their opinion. They're going to love to talk things through and share how they feel about certain things. They're very expressive with their feelings. They also are great at getting the party started and getting the conversation going, whether they're strangers or anyone else, because they initiate that conversation. They approach others to bring them in. And then it brings people together, and they're very articulate. They talk a lot with their hands. They get results through people and providing inspiration and optimism for others. They sometimes are also so optimistic that they're dreamers. And it's like, come down to planet Earth, please. And sometimes they just need to connect. They're kind of sometimes connection junkies. And sometimes the challenge is if they're doing all that all the time, they're not getting the task done or necessarily meeting other people's needs. And when we get to the next energy S, we'll share a small little story on that. The I also understands people, the big picture, and the feelings. And again, this is the energy that if there's too many details or managing tasks, or they're in that back office or in the back of the house, they might cease to shine, because they really shine when they're out in front of other people and bringing people together and having that interaction. So that brings us then S to the S, which is about service and support. And to kind of just highlight what we went through, right? The D's can be the drivers and deciders. The I's can be the influence and invite people in. And the S then provides that service and support. And sometimes they can be a good bridge between the front of the house and the back of the house. And one of the things that the S understands, along with that I energy, because remember when we looked at that circle, they're people focused. So they understand that you can't have exceptional customer service without exceptions. And it's about the people that need to be flexible, not necessarily so much rigid to the rules or compliance. And it's not just customer service for them, it is customer care and making people feel welcome like family. So where that I energy might invite people in and be great at greeting them, it's the S that's really going to also have some of that energy that's going to build that relationship for them, give them that one-on-one attention with caring, allow them to feel like family and to meet their needs. And they'll sometimes be like, can't we all just get along? And the S's bring such an important aspect of things because they bring a tempo. The S's also like to be busy, but they bring a pace to that busyness. Even if the restaurant is super crazy and busy, they will look as cool as a cucumber, while that sometimes they can be going a little bit crazy inside. Now, also an important distinction, because the I and the S energy we just talked about are people focused, here's a little bit of the difference. The I, again, welcomes people in. It loves making that new contact, connecting with them, interacting with them. And that S then is more about kind of then the handoff and making sure there's the service and support. So sometimes, for instance, if you have a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant that has a lot of I energy, let's say they forgot the ketchup, right? All of a sudden they might apologize, they might kind of chit chat it up, and then get so lost in the conversation that the table then has to remind them, hey, can you go get me that ketchup? Where on the other hand, is if the S waiter or waitress had forgot the ketchup, they would apologize, quickly build some rapport again, and then say, let me go get you your ketchup. So the S's are great at making sure that people's needs are met, as one small example with that. So let's talk about a few other qualities of that S energy. They bring a consistency to the group. They are great with logistics, planning, coordinating, making sure that things are fulfilled, bringing a pace. They do the ordinary steps, 1, 2, 3, more consistently than anyone else. They want to know what's the plan. They want to follow the plan. They need to make sure things are comfortable and stable. They want to slow them down so there's less reaction. They want to make sure that there's consensus on the bus. Nobody's left behind. Pace things out. It's not too fast. They bring a steady hand and again, never look rattled. A little bit more about the S there as well. Now, the C is all about quality control or courteous, right? And this isn't so much about necessarily the S style, which is about customer care, but they're courteous because it's the right thing to do. So it can display a similar behavior for different reasons. But this energy is much more task focused, meaning it prioritizes the task over the people. and they like to lead from behind the scenes. They won't always want to be the face or constantly interacting with other people, as sometimes interacting with people can be very emotional or very dramatic, and dealing with those sorts of things all the time can be a little bit tiresome for them, because they're actually very good at removing emotion from the situation. So they don't want people to expect that they should wear their emotion on their sleeve. And that's a really important quality to bring, because sometimes we need to take the emotion out of the situation. And for them, they can see things very black and white. They can compartmentalize things very well. And then there's also this amazing attention to detail, that quality control, or with the portion sizes, or with the aesthetics. And they like to lead from behind the scenes, is where they're more comfortable. And what it really is about for them is not necessarily compliance to rules, but it's about having really high standards, to making sure that what out the door reflects the highest quality, so things can be retained and the people that come in will come back. It's also why they're much more cautious. And they sometimes can have a sense of perfection, making sure things are right. And also, like the devil is in the details, so to speak. They're also going to want to make sure to have some time to think things through, as will that S energy. They also are great at looking for risk management, or where can things go wrong. They're very cautious as well, because they don't want the business to be criticized. Again, that's why some of that attention to quality is so important. And that's also why when this style says you're good to go, you're good to go, because they've dotted their I's and they've crossed their T's, which is one reason that their motto can be measure twice, cut once, for instance. They can be a very direct communicator, because it's black and white, it's right or wrong, it's this or that. And they can separate the feelings from the particular task that's at hand. On that note, okay, so right now, now that we've covered this a little bit, if some of you do have questions, you can put some of those in chat, or we can also take some of you that are also on mute off if you'd like as well. But again, remember we started, go back here, with kind of talking about, where some of these people best fit within our organization. And now that we've talked about these styles and approaches, you can see, excuse me for 1 minute, there's an interesting animation that keeps going off on my slide, and it's not really going to be helpful for us to keep, just give me 1 moment. And there we go. All right,
when you're ready to, Joseph, we might want to stop the screen sharing so you can see more faces when you're ready.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that very much. Okay. Yeah, why don't we stop the screen sharing, and then we can take some questions if you all have it. And let me just stop on this. But actually, just on this slide for a moment, just to kind of give some reference to where we started with this, like where people can kind of fit best in the organization. Those D's and the I energy like to lead more from the front. They're the drivers and the influencers. A lot of times they like to be the face or out front, where that S and C energy can sometimes be more the care and the quality that's from behind the scenes. Also, kind of another reference point that can give you some context, and this is on the handout that you got earlier. And this is a little bit of a generalization, but it'll give you some context. The D's and the I's prefer a much more faster paced environment. For example, think of a Chili's late night, where a whole bunch of people are coming in, they sit down, and they got to turn the tables very quickly. They like to move fast, they can build rapport quickly, they can pitch and catch off that, right? And there's also a lower dollar value on the table, but they turn the tables quicker. That's an environment that they can love. Where that S and C energy could prefer something more that's like fine dining, where people come in and they're going to sit down for 2 hours. They're going to go through a couple different servings. And there's really quality time to build a rapport and a relationship with the people that come in and give them a great experience, where they don't turn the tables over as fast, but they have a higher dollar value on each one that's there. I remember learning about that from someone that had the experience at both of those restaurants because they were much more of an S energy. And she shared with me how much she preferred more working in that fine dining experience where the environment and just the pace of the restaurant really matched more of her nature than something like Chili's that was constantly moving, the tables were turning over, because for her, by the time they got up and left, she was just feeling like she kind of got to know them and then the interaction was over. So you can kind of see some of those similarities as well. So with that said, let's take it off the screen share. And I can now see all of your wonderful faces. Thank you, Andrew and Anne. And we got a lot of Joseph Hastraders out there still. So with the names. So what we do want to do is if any of you have any quick questions, and also remember, this was kind of a quick overview to give you some introductions to this. Make sure to stay connected with us on Linkbook, Facebook, and Eventbrite. And also for any of you looking for next steps of how you can utilize this, we can set up a strategy session. We have an assessment tool to help give you better insight to where you are at, where some of your team's at. So those are some of the next steps that can also help support you in better understanding yourself and others and some of these things about where people can feel most comfortable in your organization and most valued. So with that, let's open it up for questions, either in the chat or raise your hand and let me know what you guys got. Where can we find the assessment tool? So that's one of the things that our university offers. So if you were looking for the assessment tool, in fact, there'll be an email that goes out later with a lot of the contact information. But what I will also do right now in chat is just share my email. And all you need to do is contact us and we can talk you through the assessment and then be able to send you the link so you can complete that for yourself and you get your results back immediately. So that's a great question, Andrew. Any of you actually out there ever taken a DISC assessment? I got a hand raised here in the live audience. I got two of them. Look at that. I know some of you aren't on cam. Oh, look, thank you. There's another Joseph Hastradder out there with their little hand emoji. Thank you there very much for that. It's great seeing some of that interaction there as well. What other questions you guys have? Having a hard time. There we go. You guys got anything else? What I'll do to also, I'm just going to kind of also bring up, if you guys are looking at your handout that you got in advance, just a couple key distinctions for you that might stimulate a couple more questions. You know, if you are interacting, for instance, with that D energy, if you're looking at the handout, actually, Amy, I'm just going to share my screen one more time quickly. Is just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what's on this handout, if you're looking at it, is that if you're communicating with some people, these are just some tips here based on their styles of how they like to be approached. Thank you. You will also, oh, look at that. That's much bigger. We'll come back to that in a moment. You can see some things with the ideal environment. That was some of the things I described between the Chili's and the fine dining. And then also to give you some examples of these different styles, you can see some names here, you know, that D behavioral style of Michael Jordan, of Vince Lombardi, or some of you might know Mark Cuban from Shark Tank. I examples would be Jim Carrey or Jay Leno, Taylor Swift, Tom Hanks. S styles would be Fred Rogers, Aaron Rodgers, Giannis. Giannis is a great example of a high S. It's one reason he probably also likes Milwaukee. That's a smaller community. You may remember after he won the finals, how he was in one of the drive-thrus and he loved Milwaukee because they all celebrated like a family together. That C energy is like the Monica Geller or Sherlock Holmes or Kevin Costner or Jack Nicklaus are some good examples. And just on a few communication tips, right? D's like to be clear, specific to the point, stick to business. And when you're interacting with them, don't pre-make their choice for them. They like autonomy, so provide alternatives and choices for making decisions. For the I's, make sure you allow time for relating and socializing. Ask their opinion. They're going to have one. Use enough time to be stimulating, fun, and fast moving. S's, start with personal icebreakers. Show sincere interest in them and people. And if a decision is required, allow them time to think it through. And for that C energy, approach them in a straightforward way. Provide them with information that they need to make the decision as well. And then also allow them their space. So those are just a few of the communication tips. I would really encourage you to read through all of them, as it can help you understand better how to approach each one of those styles. And for any of you also interested in the assessment, when you get yours back, there's some pages in there on communication do's and don'ts. And actually on that note for a minute, just to pull this up for you, is if on our website, in case any of you are interested in seeing what one of those assessment looks like, is under our EWH University, you will see team building tools. And down here is a number of the different assessments that we offer. And I'm going to scroll to this one. And what it'll do is it'll pop up what one of these reports looks like. They're very thorough. But they'll have general characteristics, and then some of the main pages like value to the organization, checklist for communicating, communicating don'ts. And then also, just so you can kind of see what your results are like, is you will get a graph back that shows you your scores on each one of those, to show you what your primary and secondary styles are that make up your nature there as well. Also on the website, once you have these tools for you or your team, there's also let me just find it here. There is the comparison report. So if you ever want to see yourself side by side with somebody in your organization, it, for instance, will have the strengths of each person, places where there can be conflict, ways to communicate, value do they each bring to the table, communication do's and don'ts, and then even the results of your graphs you can see side by side. And then if you have an entire team report, you can actually get a report with your entire team as well to see where you're all at. So just some additional distinctions on that part as well. So all of you are aware, on our website, there's also our upcoming events, which if you look at January, you will see that there's some essentials workshops here. And actually the back half of Leadership Essentials is actually where we go more in depth on this. We go a lot more into that wheel that you're going to see on there that we went over as well, just to kind of remind you what that looks like. And we'll include these links for you in our follow-up email here as well. But if you're under articles on our website, it'll take you to a page. And you see some of these tabs here. There's a tab on leadership. And then there is, oopsies, hold on. We need to go to team and hiring. So under team and hiring, there's tools to lead your team to hit the numbers. And you'll see that circle that we were talking about. And this will go a little bit more in depth on some of the styles. We wanted to really talk about it in the context of the value that each one of them brings to the organization. So in our second half of Business Essentials, again, which is this class here, we talk about that. And the first half of that class, by the way, is Cash Flow Essentials, of being able to better understand your numbers, some of which we covered in those first two sessions that we had. And then also anyone that's looking to set goals for their organization as well, we have Growth Essentials after that on January 5th too. So that's just a little bit more about some of the resources that we have out there for you guys, some of the next steps that you have. Again, if you're interested in one of the assessments, just email us. There'll also be the other email that goes out afterwards. And we can just set up a strategy session to kind of talk things through what you're looking for in your organization and how you can best utilize these tools. Because today was to kind of give you a foundation, expose it to you, and show you a lot of the value that these tools can bring to the table. So I know we got a few minutes left here, and just wanted to see if anybody else has any other questions. And while you're doing that, again, just to give some people some time to think about that, again, follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Eventbrite or on Instagram. These are all places that you can stay connected with us, learn about some of the new resources we have out there, whether it's article, a new distinction that we shared, or some of our upcoming classes. It's a great way to stay connected.